रेडी, स्टार्ट. of course, of it, of him, of whom, of his own, of some, of the case, of this class, of this country, of the committee, of the government, of this kind, of this department, of this matter, of this month, of those who are, of those who have, of which, of us, of your letter, of your department, of your mother, of your sister, of you, of your own, of her, of their own. ऑफ एज ए ग्राम लोग यूज किया जाता है सिंबॉलिक लाइन से ऊपर, पी का 1/3 हिस्सा ऑफ. आपने लिखना ऑफ कोर्स, ऑफ इट, टी ऑन द लाइन, ऑफ हिम ऊपर डॉट लगाते हैं, नीचे डॉट लगाते हैं तो ऑफ मी हो जाता है. ऑफ माई में हम यहाँ आई लगाते हैं. ऑफ होम डैश लगाएंगे यहाँ पे ठीक है इसके साथ. ऑफ हिज ऑन, ऑफ सम, डबलिंग नहीं है, नॉर्मल साइज है. ऑफ द केस, केमएस. ऑफ दिस केस, ऑफ दिस क्लास, ऑफ दिस कंट्री, के एन की डबलिंग कर देंगे. या आप कंट्री को पुराने तरीके से बना सकते हो, के एन को हाफ करके आर अपवर्ड लगा सकते हो. ऑफ द कंट्री, के एन की डबलिंग मोस्टली यूज किया जाता है. ऑफ द कमिटी गैप कर देंगे कम की वजह से. ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट, गे. ऑफ दिस काइंड, के एन हाफ. ऑफ दिस डिपार्टमेंट, डी. ऑफ दिस मैटर डबलिंग हो जाएगा मैटर के लिए. ऑफ दिस मंथ, मंथ के लिए इट लगाते हैं. ऑफ दोज हु आर, ऑफ दोज लाइन्स ऊपर, फिर हु, फिर आर अपवर्ड. ऑफ दोज हु हैव, ऑफ दोज हु हैव का हुक लगा देंगे. ऑफ विच, मच लाइन से ऊपर होता है, विच लाइन को टच करता है. ऑफ अस, चाहो तो डेस्क के लिए डैश मार सकते हो. ऑफ योर लेटर, आर की डबलिंग, एल की डबलिंग कर देंगे लेटर के लिए. ऑफ योर डिपार्टमेंट, डी से काट दो. ऑफ योर मदर, एम की डबलिंग. ऑफ योर सिस्टर, एस और एस की डबलिंग, एस सर्कल. ऑफ यू, ऑफ योर ऑन, ऑन के लिए हुक लगा देंगे इनका. ऑफ हर, एच का टिक आर डाउनवर्ड. ऑफ देयर, ऑन लाइन बनता है देयर. ऑफ देयर ऑन, एन का हुक लगा दो. देखो फिर से. ऑफ कोर्स, ऑफ इट, ऑफ हिम, of whom, of his own, of some, of the case, of this class, of this country, of the committee, of the government, of this kind, of this department, of this matter, of this month, of those who are, of those who have, of which, of us, of your letter, of your department, of your mother, of your sister, of you, of your own, of her, of their own. डिक्टेशन लिखेंगे पहले 100 पे, उसके बाद फिर 80 पे, उसके बाद एक सीन लिखेंगे. ऑफ दिस कमिटी के लिए टी लगेगा, डिपार्टमेंट का डी डार्क होता है, कमिटी डिसेंट होता है। ऑफ दिस, यहाँ पे टी लगाते हैं, लाइट, डिपार्टमेंट को डार्क करते हैं। ये थोड़ा ऊपर भी कर सकते हो, हाफ ऊपर भी कर सकते हो। लाइट डार्क का डिफरेंस नहीं होता, तो कमेटी के लिए आप कमेटी के टी को नीचे की तरफ रख सकते हो, डिपार्टमेंट को ऊपर की तरफ रख सकते हो। वैसे लाइट डार्क का डिफरेंस होना ही चाहिए। Started. In presenting this report, my first duty would be to thank the Debar Commission for preparing this valuable document. The Commission have gone deep into the various aspects of this problem and have produced an important and valuable document. This Commission had to toil a lot and they had to put in very hard work. I should like to convey my thanks and congratulations to the chairman of the commission, Sri Devar, and also to his other colleagues for this useful contribution. As the House is aware, the problem of the scheduled tribes has been constantly engaging the attention of the government since the constitution was framed and adopted. Still, the government were not satisfied with the actual progress made. It was in that context that the government appointed two committees before the Debar Commission was appointed. The first was the 11 Committee, which especially dealt with the problem of the tribal blocks. The second committee was appointed on the suggestion of the Estimates Committee to study the problem of the backward communities especially. On top of that, in pursuance of Article 339 of the Constitution, the government appointed the Debar Commission, and now it is for the House to give its opinion on the recommendations made by the Commission. Our desire is that as soon as the Parliament, this House as well as the other House has discussed this report and expressed its views, we will go ahead with the recommendations made, and we will certainly like that they are implemented as early as possible. I do not want to enter into generalities, but it must be said that our country is vast and our problems are also immense. Generally, we are a very poor country, and it is true that during the British days, we did not actually realize what poverty meant. People suffered without much protest, but now, when the country is trying to go ahead with economic development, it is but natural that every section of our community should like to progress simultaneously. I think if we are frank, we should admit that there are certain weaker sections of our community in the country who have not made as much advance and progress as others have done. It has therefore become very important that we should lay special emphasis on the development of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. It is necessary, therefore, that we should carefully consider the various recommendations made and see what we can do to achieve a certain target within a prescribed period. The scheduled tribes have been living in isolated places, far off places, not connected with roads. They do not have any amenities of life, neither medical aid nor even proper educational facilities. We have to bring them out of that situation, and we must try to integrate those people with other sections of our countrymen. It is far from my mind to suggest that we should impose anything on them, whether our customs or our culture, though the culture is more or less common throughout the country, but every community has its own conventions and customs. Therefore, when I say that there should be complete integration, I do not mean to suggest that there should be imposition of anything on the tribal communities as such. Still, it is essential that irrigation will only be possible if their standards are raised. If they are more or less brought to the same level where we or the people are who are not so isolated. So we have to bring these people to that level, and we can do that not by implementing certain schemes only, but by bringing about a radical change in our outlook and approach. There may be different communities and different religions in our country, but India had its own unique tradition in the past, which we have to carry on and maintain even now. In fact, our philosophic base has been unity in diversity, and in it is our good fortune that when we are free, when we have become independent, various communities and religions exist in our country, and it should be our effort to bring about complete unity and solidarity amongst ourselves, even if our religions are different or we differ in our customs, rights, etc. So I think that it is a challenge to all of us, and I have no doubt that we will be able to meet this challenge. I do not want to take more time of the house. As I said in the beginning, I do not want to enter into generalities. So far as the recommendations of the Commission are concerned, they can broadly be divided into two categories. There are recommendations which are to be dealt with or which directly concern the Home Ministry and some other ministries of the Government of India. There are other recommendations which mainly concern the state governments. In fact, it is the state governments which have really to execute and implement the programs. It was suggested by the Commission that there should be a separate department for the scheduled tribes. This matter was considered in the conference, but it was generally felt that if the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes are separated to be dealt with by different departments, there will be a good deal of duplication of work, because two sets of officers will have to traverse the same area and more or less consider the same problems. It was therefore the unanimous opinion of the Conference of State Ministers that one department should deal with the problems of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, and it was also agreed that there should be a separate directorate for the same. If there is a separate directorate, then it can concentrate on problems concerning the scheduled tribes. It was also suggested that this directorate, which will have to be set up in all the states, and especially in states where the population of the scheduled tribes exceeds 1 million, should also look after the work relating to the de-notified and the nomadic tribes, in addition to, as I said, the work relating to the scheduled tribes. The conference was in favor of having tribes advisory councils to advise on the protection and development of the scheduled tribes in all the states and union territories, whether they have scheduled areas or not. 1000 प्लस वर्ड है, फ्लक्चुएशंस 5 to 7 वर्ड अपवर्ड है, 100 की स्पीड है, और ये आपको मिल जाएगा SSC C&D ग्रेड टेस्ट के नाम से मिल जाएगा. 60 YouTube@100 with comma. URL सेम है, 3p program MS में .steno18.in 80 पे लिखेंगे. Started. The demands of science are very great indeed, and we should not grudge making the requisite allocations for scientific research. I think Mr. Humayun Kabir was quite right when at the conference of scientists and educationists he suggested that at least 1% of the national income should be allocated for scientific research and so on. I think it is not a very big demand. At present, we spent only rupees 40 crores, and that is not by any account an adequate sum which is needed in order even to implement what has been spelled out in the Scientific Policy Resolution of 1958. What is the use of passing a resolution and declaring from the top of the house to the world, and at the same time not making adequate financial allocations in order to carry out the tasks set out in that resolution. Therefore, the blame in this matter largely lies with the government and the cabinet. The cabinet, I do not know, has very many committees under it, but it should pay a little more attention to scientific research, and I think everything should be done in order to meet their financial requirements. The finance minister of the country should be asked to find money for scientific research, because here if you spend money, you extend your exploration of the uncharted resources of our country that will lead to an increase in production. Also, in various other scientific fields, the scientific urge for work will lead to increase in national wealth. Therefore, whatever we may spend today out of our financial resources, or even by deficit financing, if you like, that will be more than rewarded by the rapid strides that we would be making a few years after as a result of scientific investigations, discoveries, and so on. That is very important. We should have a far-sighted view in this matter and we must try to see beyond our nose. As far as the finance minister is concerned, when it comes to science, he certainly does not see beyond his nose, and that is the trouble with him. Will the Honorable Minister in charge of scientific affairs kindly pull up his colleague in the cabinet meetings and tell him as to how he should pay a little more attention to the problems and requirements of science in the progress of India. We have today, for example, 25,000 persons engaged in scientific work. This is not adequate at all for a vast country like this and developing country like this. We want to develop a pace. Therefore, that number is far too inadequate in proportions to the size of the country. The number of science graduates and technical graduates again is not very large. Therefore, these figures can be gone into. I do not wish to take your time by giving these figures, but I think any scientist will tell you that in this matter we have been rather deficient, and we are not aware that in order to go ahead in bigger strides, we must put on the field a large number of scientific workers, and how can it be done unless the entire system is properly organized and the resources are found. Additional funds are therefore particularly essential to put into commission a larger number of scientific workers for carrying out the tasks even as they have been set out in the scientific policy resolution. Here then comes the question of utilization of funds in the most economic manner. I regret to say, from a layman's study of some of the things, that the funds are not being properly utilized. I am not blaming the scientist in this connection. It is the job of the administrators to see that funds are properly utilized, and for one thing, they should be based on definite projects within the framework of the national program. There should not be any desultory flow in this or that direction. It should be given a purpose and based on a certain project apart from other things. Therefore, research work has got to be project oriented in a developing economy such as we have. As I said, the question of coordination is very important, and compartmentalization must go. Not that there should not be branches, but there should not be what we understand as compartmentalization. A scientific policy commission should be appointed I am not in favor of having a minister. In this connection, I must mention about our great private sector. There are some gentlemen of the private sector sitting on this side of the house and that side of the house. We are mixed parliamentarians, just as we are a mixed economy outside. Mr. Chairman, the private sector is suffering from a class bias in the matter of science. That is what I say. They direct the scientific research and activity within their sphere from a narrow range of interest and from a narrow motive. I am not advocating a class war in this house. 800 प्लस वर्ड है, 80 की स्पीड है, फ्लक्चुएशन 5 से 7 वर्ड अप साइड है, और ये आपको SSC C D टेस्ट 60@80 के उसमें मिलेगा आपको. सीन कंटेंट लिखेंगे इसके बाद, अगर सीन किसी को लिखना है तो 60 सेम होगा सब कुछ. रेडी? Started. There has been some reference to the improvement in our economic situation also. We find that we have made good progress in production. We were faced equally with a difficult situation so far as cloth was concerned. There was a deficit of food and there was also shortage of cloth. I do remember the scenes that we had to witness in several cities where people had to stand in queues for hours together for 2 meters of very ordinary cloth, but now the situation is quite changed. We have produced much cloth and we are in a position to export cloth. During the British period, we were required to import cloth, but now we are in a position to export cloth. After partition, we were faced with the question of raw material, namely cotton. We had cotton mills, but cotton remained in Pakistan. Even that problem has been solved. We had placed before us a target for more production of cotton, and not only has that target been achieved, but it has been achieved in shorter period to the satisfaction of all people in the country. From this survey, sir, you will find that everybody should be convinced that we are making good progress in the realization of the objectives of the 5-year plan. Then there is a reference that in several essential commodities we have got increased production. This cannot be denied. in spite of this increased production, I must admit we have not been able to solve the question of unemployment, but efforts are being made to ease the situation so far as this question is concerned. The main thing to which I would like to refer is that the President was pleased to say and say very plainly that so far as cottage industries were concerned, we have not been able to make good progress. As a matter of fact, very little progress has been made. If in this country we have to solve the question of unemployment, we must take very seriously to the development of cottage industries. That alone will solve this problem of unemployment. We want to increase production, but we want to take to such means for increasing our production as would be man absorbing and not man saving, as have been resorted to by the Western countries. That alone will solve our problem to a very great extent. If we organize our cottage industries, if we take to the spirit of Swadeshi, I have no doubt we will solve the problem of unemployment to a great extent. Then, sir, a reference has been made to certain additional projects which have been included in the 5-year plan. There was a great demand from Maharashtra to include this project in the 5-year plan. A couple of years ago, there was a conference presided over by my colleague from the district, the present Revenue Minister of Maharashtra. He had presided over it, and there was a unanimous demand supported by particularly the entire people from Maharashtra that this project should be included in the 5-year plan. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Government of India and the Government of Maharashtra for having seen to it that this project in Maharashtra is included in the 5-year plan. The President's address makes reference to the improvement of our transport and communications. Our increased production leads to the question of better transport facilities. The agricultural production is on the increase, but sir, if there is no betterment of our transport facilities, this increased production in agriculture will not benefit the agriculturists. In my part of the country, even now, this situation prevails. The production is on the increase, but the agriculturists are suffering on account of inadequate facilities of railway transport. I was glad to find from the President's address that the railways are thinking of opening even new lines very soon. It has also been said that so far as locomotives and rolling stock are concerned, the manufacture of these is going on very satisfactorily, and we have made good progress in this respect during the last few years. Any nation can be proud of this achievement. Then there is a reference to the housing conditions. We can very well remember the scenes that we were required to witness immediately after partition. Thousands and tens of thousands of our brethren came to this country from Pakistan. It was a very serious question as to how to house them, but the day has come when the question has practically been solved, or it can at least be said that we are near the solution of the question. 72 crores of rupees have been spent during the last few years in constructing houses for the refugees, and in this very city we are witnessing an exhibition where we can see the models of cheap and decent houses. If these cheap houses are constructed for the refugees, it will provide shelter for them at a low cost. ये 6 नंबर है, सीन कंटेंट केसी का। आप विद कॉमा नो कॉमा से दोनों फाइल में से किसी में टाइप कर सकते हो। स्पीड 80 की है, फ्लेक्सेशन 3 या 4 की अपसाइड है।